What's up, my comic comrades? The Witcher has become one of the most popular shows on Netflix, not to mention one of my personal favorites. So with season 2 being released to the world back in December, we figured it was high time to break down the history of The Witcher, or The Witchers. Now, with that said, today we're going to be focusing on the Witcher characters specifically, because the universe as a whole is ginormous, and it would be like trying to sum up all of Game of Thrones or Harry Potter in 10 to 15 minutes. There's no way that would be possible, at least not in a way that would give you any real substance for the respective universe. And the same is true for the Witcher universe. So if you all dig this episode, we will continue to do Witcher-themed videos around Yennefer, Ciri, Vesemir, the elves, mages, and so on. But today it's all about the various Witchers, who of course are the title characters of the books, games, and Netflix series. Before we dive in, however, we want to thank Trade Coffee for sponsoring today's episode. Starting the day with a hot cup of coffee is a long-standing tradition throughout the world, but in more recent years, it has grown into a diverse art form. Some still prefer the punch of a hot cup of dark roast, while others like their coffee on ice with whipped cream and caramel. But no matter how you enjoy your cup of Java, Trade Coffee makes it easy to brew your best cup at home. You see, while 90% of coffee you'll find at your grocery store is actually stale, Trade matches coffee roast to your own personal taste, and then ships your selected bag of fresh coffee magic straight from the roastery to your front door. And when I say fresh, I mean your coffee is roasted and shipped within 24 hours of ordering. So you'd have to set up a bed at the roastery to get it any fresher. Anyway, it all starts with a few simple questions about the type of coffee you typically like most. You then choose which curated roast you want to try first, choose your delivery frequency, and boom, the freshest coffee your heart could ask for appears at your doorstep as often as you want. And if you don't like your first bag, Trade will replace it with another one for free. But our favorite thing about Trade is it allows us to get ethically sourced coffee while supporting America's best independent roasters and their small businesses. So we're getting much higher quality and keeping the communities who serve us strong. Not to mention they use compostable packaging to ship all their coffee. So we get a great cup of joe and keep our priorities in order at the same time. And right now, Trade is offering a total of $20 off your first 3 bags when you go to drinktrade.com/variant or click the link in the description below. That's more than 16 cups of coffee for free. To get started, take their quiz at drinktrade.com/variant and start your journey to your perfect cup. Again, that's drinktrade.com/variant for $20 off your first 3 bags. You can thank us later. With that covered, let's toss a coin to some Witchers. If you know, you know. Like all great TV series and movies of the last few decades, The Witcher was originally a book. Specifically, a series of 6 fantasy novels, one being a standalone, and 15 short stories written by Polish author Andrzej Sapkowski. And I probably butchered his name, I'm sorry. The first novel is titled Blood of the Elves and was published in 1994 by publisher Supernova. The universe primarily focuses on Witchers, specifically one Witcher and the universe's main character, Geralt of Rivia. As most of you know from the Netflix series, Geralt is your go-to Witcher of the series and is from the School of the Wolf, which was active throughout the 13th century. He's in love with the mage Yennefer, but the relationship is rocky to say the least. He's also the adoptive father of Ciri. Here's an interesting tidbit. During the trial of the Grasses, Geralt was found to have an unusual tolerance for the mutagens that give the Witchers their powers and abilities. Because of this, he was subject to even more experimental mutagens, which causes his hair to turn white, as well as giving him greater strength, speed, and stamina than his fellow Witchers. So if you were watching season 2 of The Witcher and you were wondering why Geralt was the only Witcher with white hair, thinking all the Witchers are supposed to have white hair, well, now you know why he's the only one. Another fun fact is, even though Geralt's name says that he hails from the city of Rivia, he doesn't. He says his mother Vaisina left him with the Witchers and he grew up in the keep of Kaer And the master there was Vesemir. He had his students choose their own surnames. That way they would appear more trustworthy to potential clients. So Geralt ultimately went with Geralt of Rivia, going as far as to adopt the accent of Rivia. But now let's move on to what the Witchers are generally all about with origins. Let's start this off with what a Witcher is. Witchers, which are also known as Wiccan, Hexer, or Witchman, is a person who has undergone extensive training, consisting of ruthless mental and physical conditioning, as well as mysterious rituals, all of which happen in Witcher schools, such as the most famed one, Kaer. The schools are, of course, to prepare future Witchers / monster slayers for hire, because that's essentially all Witchers are. They're monster hunters. Think of them as like Van Helsing on steroids. Now, like all of you know, and I've already said, Geralt is the central character in the Witcher saga, whether you're talking about games, books, or the Netflix series. And there's a good reason for that, because in the novel, he is said to be one of the greatest Witchers ever. But now let's move into the creation of the Witchers, their origin, and how they came to be. Essentially, as humans were settling down in the northern part of the continent where the Nilfgaardian Empire resides, they were having to deal with an array of monsters that inhabited the land. Needless to say, the humans were not very well equipped to deal with the monsters, so the rulers of the north were like, we need to fix this, and tasked their mages to create magic-wielding warriors or hunters to slay these monsters for them. They did this through a mix of magic, science, and mutagens, aka alchemy. But you know, as humans, generally speaking, we're never satisfied with anything, always wanting more, bigger, and better. So unfortunately, witchers proved to have only limited magical potential, and because of this were deemed failures and vanished from the kingdom. This would lead us to the first age of witchers. Once the witchers were banished, they were brought to Castle Morgreg by a handful of mages who wished to experiment on them more. This first generation of witchers would continue to train, all while the mages created more witchers, which eventually would establish the Order of Witchers. Eventually, the original 5 witchers would set out, and with that, the first age of witchers began. But you see, the problem was, over time, the order was abandoned by the original mages. Then a very violent fight broke out amongst their own, and after several deaths, and the witchers' ever-growing disillusionment about the Order of the Witchers' purpose, the final witchers started abandoning Morgreg, which brought the first age of the witchers to an end. That leads us to the second era of the Witchers. After this, we enter the end of the Golden Age. No, I'm not talking about Schuster's Superman and Bill Finger Batman. Anyway, in the 1160s, the Witchers were finally successful, like super successful. So much so, monsters were incredibly rare. The churches of the North then started spreading propaganda to make people not trust the Witchers, with the rulers of the North pushing their distrust for them as well. So even though the Witchers were essentially responsible for the extinction of monsters, they were now the monsters in the eyes of the general population. This led to the 5 schools of the Witchers coming under attack from a bunch of different people. And when the last one fell, there was barely any Witchers left. So if you watch the Witcher series, that's why there are so few of them. Even though I know the show took its liberties with things and not everything I just said matches up with the show, but work with me here. I'm trying to bring the 2 worlds together, okay? But now, let's move on to story arcs. So that was a brief summary of how the Witchers came to be and a run through of their evolution, so to speak. But as far as story arcs go, the main protagonist, of course, is the Witcher Geralt, played by Superman himself, Henry Cavill, in the live-action Netflix series. So for today, we're essentially just going to run down Geralt's life as a Witcher and not his whole life, because that would be a very long video. So we're going to cherry pick some of the moments we think you need to know. As I mentioned earlier, Geralt was left by the Witchers as a baby by his mother, and when he was of age, he started training at the School of Wolf. He would make several friends like Eskel and Gweld. He was trained by Vesemir, who makes his live-action debut in Witcher Season 2. But we learn in the novel/comics that Vesemir was very harsh with his training, so much so, one of the students ended up dying. Eventually, Geralt was put through the trial of Forest Eyes. Here, he was left tied up in the woods and blindfolded with the goal of having to return to the keep by morning, or he would fail. Geralt was freed by Adine and let him return to his master. Sometime after this, the Witcher Wolf and Cat schools had a tournament with one another. This tournament is organized by King Rodowit, who was secretly plotting with the Witcher's Cat School to kill the Witchers of the Wolf School. In the first battle of the tournament, Geralt faced off against Gweld, and while they were fighting, they slowly realized this whole tournament was a farce. But as they both realized this, a druid put a mind control spell upon Gweld, which made him attack his friend violently, forcing Geralt to kill Gweld by impaling him with a sword through the chest. Right after, soldiers under Rodowit's command showed up and started killing off the Witchers, but Geralt was able to escape on a horse. Now, all of what I just said is considered canon in the Witcher comic books, not necessarily the novels. Anyway, due to Geralt's success in training, he was selected to get additional mutation experiments. He was the only Witcher to survive these experiments, but as a side effect of these additional mutagens, his hair turned stark white. After Geralt completed his Witcher training, he went off into the world on a horse, which he named Roach, a name he would give every horse he had thereafter. But anyway, once he set out on his horse Roach for the first time, he finally became a monster slayer for hire. At the beginning of his career as a Witcher, Geralt was enthusiastic. He was needed in a world full of monsters and wanted to protect the innocent from them. But after saving a girl from rape and expecting gratitude from her, which he didn't get, Geralt became a bit jaded and rarely intervened in matters that weren't his own. In the coming years after this, Geralt would travel across the entire continent. He would visit fortresses and towns looking for people who nailed proclamations to post, which read, "Witcher urgently needed." This leads him on a crap ton of adventures and sacred sites, such as ruins, hidden grottos in the mountains, dungeons, necropolis, and more. Throughout his career, he has killed almost every beast and monster you could think of, such as ghouls, vampires, giant scorpions, kikimoras, leshies, foglers, werewolves, manticores, and the list goes on. Eventually, Geralt would end up meeting Yennefer, his lady love, who's also a mage. And to say they have a complicated relationship isn't doing it justice. If you watched the first 2 seasons of The Witcher or read the novels, you know what I'm talking about. Then a little after this, he would meet his child surprise, Ciri. Anyway, there's a lot more we can get into about Geralt, but we're gonna save that for his own History of episode, as this episode is just an overview of the Witchers in general, and not necessarily Geralt. But we went over him for story arcs as he is the main character of the series. But with that said, friends, it's time to go over the Witcher's powers and abilities, as I'm sure many of you are curious what exactly the Witchers can do. As I mentioned several times throughout the episode, Witchers are put through an intense alchemical process consisting of mutagenic compounds and relentless physical and magical training, all of which made them extremely dangerous and highly versatile against almost any opponent. Witchers possess superhuman strength and speed. Essentially, after the alchemical process and consumption of mutagens, Witchers become mutants that are specifically built to hunt and kill inhuman prey. Think of it almost like what the Super Soldier Serum did for Captain America. It enhances all of his abilities. Not like to Superman level, but pretty freaking strong and fast. All Witchers are sterile, which means they cannot reproduce. They also have cat-like eyes, which look cool but also give them night vision. Having an amazing boosted immune system, they also have a great resistance to diseases, which allows them to consume large amounts of potions that have proved to be deadly if consumed even in small amounts by a normal human. Witchers also have way more magical potential than a normal human. This allows them to perform simple yet incredibly versatile combat magic, which we see Geralt and other Witchers use in the Netflix series. They also have a sixth sense that allows them to feel things around them, kind of like a spider sense. And they have an accelerated healing factor and a very long lifespan, living for at least a few centuries. As for weapons, Witchers use an array of weapons, but their primary weapon is a sword. A steel sword, which they use for mundane tasks, and a sword made of silver, which they use to fight magical creatures and monsters. With the sword, they're one of the deadliest opponents you'll ever come across. Mix that with the potions that we see Geralt drink in the show, which turns his eyes black, essentially giving him a temporary power boost. Going Super Saiyan, if you will, and you have one of the baddest warriors in all of fantasy. But now, let's move on to reading recommendations. This is actually super easy. Read all 6 of the Witcher novels, the Dark Horse comic series, and of course, watch The Witcher on Netflix. That'll be enough Witcher to last you for quite a while. First up for the week of February 9th, we have Batman Catwoman issue 10. The 3 storylines that have been playing out in this title converge as Catwoman fights for her life against the Joker and her own daughter, Batwoman. What secrets from her deadly relationship with the Clown Prince of Crime will cause such a rift between mother and daughter? Next up, we have Devil's Reign issue 4. New York is under siege and Mayor Fisk has broken. Whatever shred of decency may have been left in him is now entirely gone. But even the Kingpin is unaware of the magnitude of danger he has put everyone in with his war against the city's superheroes. Third on the list, we have Darth Vader issue 20. Vader continues his quest to destroy the agents of Crimson Dawn, abetted by an unlikely crew of heroes and assassins. But everything gets turned on its head with the return of Padme Amidala's former handmaiden. Who's the hero and who's the villain? And will they choose chaos or order in the age of the Crimson Reign? Next, we have the Joker issue 12. There are dark, sinister secrets in the world, and then there are the secrets held by the infamous Sampson family on their compound down in Texas. Jim Gordon is about to enter a hell he's never imagined to save the Joker. And last on our list, we have Maestro World War M issue 1. This is the epic final chapter of Peter David's Maestro trilogy. AIM, the Pantheon, and even Doctor Doom have all fallen before the might of the Maestro. Finally, he may now reign over his kingdom with a firm green fist. Except he didn't count on the Abomination rising from the dead and forming an alliance with Namor and Doom. And the dangerous new alliance is ready for war, World War M. And that's gonna bring today's episode of Variant to a close. But if you like this episode, check out this one to my left, your right. And if you like the channel, you know what to do. Like, subscribe, and comment. It helps us grow. But other than that, I'll see you guys next time when I talk about all things comics and possibly The Witcher.